We are going live here for Tuesday Talks. Now, we all know that Tuesday Talk is all about getting to know an individual and finding out what makes them tick, what do they care about, how their career reflects that, and what motivates them to keep going. Now, today's guest is called Fred Rutman, also goes by the name of Repeatedly Dead Fred, and he's a author of a memoir called "The Summer I Died 20 Times," which is due to be released, and it should be in this month, I believe. We'll get Fred on and get him to talk about it a bit more and understand what he does. You there, Fred? Let me just see if we can get you on. Hi, Fred. How are you doing?
Good, Zishan. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you very much for taking the time out and hopping on to Tuesday Talks.
My pleasure. I'm thrilled to be on, and thank you for your patience with helping me figure out how to get on this. As I told you before, I'm a newbie. I've never done one of these, so thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. No problem. That's all wonderful and great. We are here, and I'm sure this will be your first of many Instagram lives that you'll continue to do by yourself as well. You know, that's what it is. I've done a short introduction for you already, but you know, you're the best person to expound on that and let us know who you are, what you do. And the biggest question that kicks off Tuesday Talks, and everybody likes to know on here as well, is, you know, why do you do it, Fred?
Well, that's a great question, and I get asked that a lot. I don't know if I have a perfect answer, but I'm going with my gut. You know, because I've been clinically dead so many times, and by clinically dead, I mean my heart has stopped beating for 30 seconds and I've stopped breathing for 30 seconds or more,
Wow.
both at the same time. People say to me, you know, like, there must be some higher purpose for you, or God must have wanted you around, or, you know, whatever religious philosophy you have. And I'm just going with my best guess, because until that one time I don't come back to life, I'm really not going to have an answer. So I think people go through a lot of crazy bad stuff like I have, and so many people have been generous to me and helped me through it all, from, you know, taking me to doctor's appointments and cooking me meals after I got out of the hospital, and just being supportive, that I feel I need to do the same for others who might not have that.
Mm.
And that's the boiled down answer.
And I love that. So your book, I think it's already out because it's meant to come out in March this year, right? Is it a certain date it's coming out, or is it already out?
I think it comes out on the 9th, but it's on pre-order right now on Amazon.
Oh, okay. And I love how your journey goes from, you know, are you able to take us through a bit more in terms of what's happened, that clinically dead part, in terms of like what was happening, if you're okay with sharing a little bit more for people,
Sure.
for our audience to understand, and then we can expand on to seeing what you're doing and why you're doing. Obviously, you're giving back to the community, which helped you every time getting to those appointments and everything. But let's try to understand as well also why and what happened.
Well, what happened is I was marking economics papers. I was a college professor, and you know, some people say taking economics is the equivalent of death. Um, Marking economics papers can also be the equivalent of death. And I just found myself suddenly, I thought I was waking up and I had like the craziest dream, but it was like there were these fireworks or explosions going on all around me, and they were so bright my eyes hurt, even though my eyes were closed. And
Wow.
I could actually feel the explosions, like I was getting the snot kicked out of me. And I didn't know what was happening. And then I sort of came to, and I was breathing heavy and sweating. And I just thought, well, this is weird. I must just be exhausted. and maybe it's time to stop marking the papers and get some sleep. So I decided to get up and started moving towards my bedroom, and boom, the same thing happened to me. And
Wow.
you know, I remember opening my eyes finally and looking up and seeing the pot lights in the ceiling, and you know, and then I said, "Come on, get to bed! Like this is ridiculous." Then I woke up in the door jam, and I was just soaking wet, and I thought, "Man, I must have some sort of flu or food
Mm.
poisoning or something." And I finally dragged myself into bed, and it never happened again until about a month later. So I had no idea how serious this condition was. I didn't even know it was a condition. So um, yeah, it went downhill from there. I went to the emergency probably 6 or 8 times over the next few months.
Mm.
And I'm not trying to slag on the medical profession, because all our medical systems have their flaws and stuff. So this is just what happened to me, and the doctors kept trying to prove I was having a heart attack. And
Okay.
they do these blood tests, and because I do have some brain damage, memory problems from this, I don't remember the names of the enzymes. But if they see these enzymes in your blood, you've had a heart attack. But they weren't seeing these enzymes in my blood. And, I'm a middle-aged fat white guy, probably needs to exercise more. And I can see why they would come to the conclusion that it should be a heart attack. But, after like the 10th, 12th, 15th time you've tested and it shows negative, maybe it's time for you to try exploring something else.
That's what I would think as well.
Yeah, but they didn't until it was forced upon them. And I ended up in another hospital, and they put something on me called a Holter monitor, which was invented by a guy named, surprisingly, Dr. Holter. And it measures your heart's electrical in real time. And that actually caught me in the middle of a couple of episodes, and they eventually figured out that my heart was stopping. So I have a condition that's called a third-degree heart block, or a full AV block, atrioventricle, and but that doesn't usually show up except in men in their early mid 70s.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
so I was a bit of an overachiever in that regard, and you really can't catch that unless you catch it in the moment. So this doctor who I felt in the hospital hadn't been really invested in me.
Mm.
And in the book, I call him Dr. Bland, because there's nothing I remember about him. He was just the blandest person I've ever met. He comes running into my room, and I'm going to say the S word if that's okay.
Go for
He
it.
goes, "Holy shit! Your heart's been stopping. You've been dead." I'm like, "What?" And that's when they figured out they had to do some radical surgery on me. And that was
Wow.
the summer I died 20 times. So that was from May 2009 to August 2009.
Wow. And you've put all that in your memoir book, which is coming out on 19th, I remember you saying. So, and and there's a Dr. Bland in there. Is there a Dr. Colorful as well, I guess?
No, but I do have some, superstar doctors in there. My therapist is Dr. Plie. She was going to be a ballerina, ended up
Okay.
becoming a
Being a doctor.
psychiatrist. Um, Dr. Pedals, as in pedals a bike, is one of my cardiologists. He's a great guy. Dr.
Ah,
Kugel is the doctor who put in my pacemakers. And he's a wizard. He's like Harry Potter level wizard, because what happened to me after 2013 is almost never stuff done before medically. So
oh wow.
yeah, so yeah,
I love this, and I love that journey of yours. Obviously, them trying to just test on you to see, oh, you had an heart attack. Just go with the obvious thing. Yeah, it's an heart attack. Putting you in that box and stereotyping it,
Mhm.
and then still not finding anything, and then right, what do we do then? Obviously, it got forced upon. Right, let's try something else. There's other tests to be done, and
Mhm.
because I would be thinking that as well after maybe the fourth time, I would like, I think it's time to do something else. They've
Mhm.
done so many, and I'm surprised. The doctors that keep going. Every health system has their own flaws, and there's a system that governs it, and hence they have to do the things they have to do. So right, so
Right.
no right or wrong answer there. They'd have to do what they have to do. But I love that obviously you are here to tell the story. So
Mhm.
take us through your book. Is there a chapter that you really want us to read, or take us through one of the paragraphs that you think has this essence of what you really were trying to convey the message there.
Yeah. Well, I think the first quarter of the book is, sort of like my origin story, how I became Fred before I became repeatedly dead Fred.
Mm,
And um, I try and establish the fact that it's being written by a person with brain damage. So what you're going to see is not necessarily linear, and I write it the same way I speak now, and I can go off on tangents like you wouldn't believe. So
mm.
fair warning, that might happen. And some people have a challenge with that, and there's a lot of sarcasm, and there's some dark humor, and I'm Jewish, so there's some viewpoints on traditional Judaism and heaven and hell and all sorts of things like that. Um, and the struggle, like you meet all sorts
Mm.
of amazing people on these journeys and all sorts of awful people. Like I remember a couple of days after my surgery, I was at synagogue, and this big guy, like I'm a fairly big guy. I played rugby. I can take a hit. But this was a much bigger guy, and he came up behind me and he slapped me on the back, like very powerful. And he's like, "Hey, I
Wow.
heard you just had heart surgery." Like he
Oh.
knocked me into the pews. Like it's just unbelievable, You meet the very best, and you meet absolute idiots.
I was like, if you're gonna, I was thinking maybe he doesn't know that you just had a heart surgery. If he knows, I wouldn't be doing that. You'd be like nice tap on the shoulder, or coming around to the front so that you're aware that I've just showed up, and then have a conversation. Wow, that is some heavy slap there.
Yeah. So it's crazy. For specific chapters, I've written the book in micro chapters. So like some chapters are maybe only 2 or 3 pages,
Mm.
and with fun titles, I tried to put fun titles. Um, but I think my first pacemaker replacement, which was in 2013. Um, I forget which chapter it is, but it's when I have to go through all this all over again because the pacemaker started to fail. And they're not really supposed to do that. And I'm
Mm.
100% dependent on the pacemaker to keep me alive. So for those in the audience that don't know what pacemakers are, they're little microcomputers that they put inside you, and they have a couple of leads or wires that connect a battery to your heart, and it replaces the signals in your heart that are no longer there because basically with my condition, the electrical system in your heart dies. And but something we think, and this is conspiracy theory for those of you who like this stuff, something must have happened in the first surgery when they initially put the first pacemaker in, and it ended up cracking one of the pacemaker leads, insulation, and it started shorting out. So I started collapsing again with my heart stopping because it interrupted the electrical signal, and
Wow.
they figured it out. And again, because it's not an easy thing to diagnose, and I went in for the surgery, and they were just cutting me open. And I'll save a lot of it for the book, otherwise you won't buy the book.
Of course,
But
of course.
but I coded on the table. So when you code, if from the TV shows, that means your heart stops and everything, and all hell breaks loose. And
Wow.
so I knew that my heart had stopped before the doctors could see it on the monitors because I had been through it
Okay.
so many times. And I just
Yeah,
said
yeah.
something like, "Oh, F, I'm gone." And then I don't know how many seconds later, because you're on
Flatline.
these, yeah, and then you're on these
Wow.
pacing pads, and then they had to abort the surgery, but do a different surgery because they had to put a temporary pacemaker in, and they do that through your groin, through the femoral artery. But in all this bedlam and scrambling to find these parts, nobody thought to sterilize me or anesthetize the region. So I'll leave that to your
leave,
imagination.
leave, yeah, we leave that to the book. So that'd be quite interesting read to.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that I can. It's really interesting to hear. How these errors can dramatically change or bring back to what you were experiencing before,
Hmm.
and then to go through and flatlining again for and then them trying to run around. And wow, it's an amazing thing that you've overcome. And obviously you're here to now tell. And I'm sure,
Hmm.
as people are telling you, obviously you've got probably a higher purpose to to do
Hmm.
something, or only you know what that is, or you're on a journey to find that out. um, and obviously, you've also started doing podcasting as well. Take us
Yes.
through that. What's that podcast about?
Um, the I have a podcast called the Dead Man Walking Podcast. It's only on YouTube so far because I'm still trying to figure out this editing thing. You know, I'm worse at editing than I am at getting on Instagram Live. How's that? So I have four main focuses on the podcast. The first is talking to people who have gone through some adversity and sh- showed great resilience and came out on the other side, hopefully a better person. So I connect with those people really well. As I mentioned, I used to be a business professor, so I like talking to small business people and talking financial literacy. So I have those topics. Um, a lot of people helped me get my book to the finish line, so I also feel an obligation to help new and emerging writers get their stories out because the traditional publishers just miss so many great stories
Mm,
because they have to go for the big volumes, the Obamas or whoever,
yeah.
and the little guys like me have a hard time getting their voice out. And lastly, I talk about mental health and wellness, and particularly intermittent fasting, because intermittent fasting outside the pacemaker is the only reason I'm alive right now. So.
Wow, that's quite interesting to hear about the intermittent fasting there as well, which is that you've started doing, uh,
Mhm.
and the support that you created for, maybe that's what it is, that support that you are helping other writers and the other people who've gone through the adversity, giving them also the voice to come and talk about it and get themselves out there. Um,
Mhm.
getting the book out there, I know it's a huge thing,
Mhm.
and getting it out there independently. If you're going through the publisher, big publisher, as you said, yeah, they look for the big numbers, and if you're not that,
Mhm.
it's a waste of time for them and effort. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Your book coming up, and your journey. I'm just in awe of the journey, and it's something I would recommend whoever's listening to this live now on Instagram or later on in the podcast versions. It will be a few months that it will take before it will come out on as a podcast version. So I'm a bit backdated on the I've got a backlog on the podcast version, so that's a bit
Sure.
there. But this it will be here for people to listen to. And whilst you've been doing all this, and and when you came out on the other side, what I want to know, and I'm sure people listening also would like to know as well, is what was going through your mind when you came to on the other side, and you have your pacemaker and everything, and now you've been asked
Um,
to make some changes or something. I don't know. What was that reaction there?
well, in the summer of 2009, when almost every time that my heart stopped, I collapsed and hit my head on something unbelievably hard. Like a
Wow.
curb or a cement countertop or just, you know, hardwood, not even hardwood, cement floors in a commercial building or whatever,
Mm.
a manhole cover. So I sustained a whole bunch of concussions.
Wow.
And with all that, plus the lack of oxygen from, not breathing and that kind of stuff,
Mm.
I had some pretty significant brain damage that I'm still working my way through. And to be honest, I didn't realize how messed up I was because I was just too battered. That cognition was gone. And I was having balance problems and depth perception problems. And, I can't tell you how many times I almost fell downstairs. Um,
Wow.
and, riding my bike was difficulty. I had to stop driving, um, and all sorts of things. I've been learning Hebrew since I was 5. So we have
Okay.
our daily prayers that you do, depending on how religious you are, 2, 3 times a day. My friends brought me my prayer book in the hospital, and I went to start reading them. I could no longer read Hebrew. It
Oh,
had knocked
wow.
an entire language out of my head. So it was,
Wow.
I just couldn't wrap my head around what was happening to me. It took a number of years for me to figure out how close I was. And last year I was on a podcast with Dr. Stefan Neff. He's I hope I got his name right. Sorry, Stephen. um, he's an anesthetist ER doctor in Australia. And he told me what happens to me if I'm not in the hospital, the odds of survival are 1 in 100. And this happened to me 20 times. And so each
Mm.
time, the odds of you surviving get significantly smaller and smaller.
Mm.
So just from that 2009 year, the odds are pretty stacked against me that I'm alive. But then
Mm.
this happened again in 2013 and 2018. So, yeah, somebody's got a reason they want me out here.
No, that's definitely there. So, and thanks for sharing that, the vulnerability side of things as well in terms of, and I'm surprised to hear that, that the whole language just disappeared. Not like, okay, I don't understand what are these certain letters. Maybe certain are there, but I don't know. I can see the letters, but I don't know what they come along as. I know the word letters, but I can't make the words out. Well,
Mhm,
losing the whole language in terms of what is this? That's
mhm.
that's just phenomenal there. So did you then have to start learning Hebrew back up again, and you're up to speed with it, or it's not as good as
Yeah,
what because you were reading that since 5, so
yeah.
that's
I definitely can't read as fast as I used to, and I definitely struggle with some words still. Um, and sometimes I don't remember what the words mean.
mm,
So, you're flipping back between Hebrew and English and Hebrew and English, and it's sort of, you know, prayer is supposed to be sort of like a meditative, reflexive thing. And when you have to keep doing the back and forth and the back and forth and, stopping and starting, it sort of lessens the experience. So,
you're missing the flow of the continuum
yeah,
that you're supposed to have, right?
yeah. And you're supposed to pray in a group, right? And so there's a certain pace you're expected to keep. And it's frustrating when you can't keep that pace when you knew you used to be able to do it.
Mm. That's it's obviously wonderful to hear that you are picking that up again, and obviously not at that full pace that you would love to be, but
Mm-hmm.
something is better than nothing. That's how I look at things as well most of the times. And so how is your day-to-day routine for the moment, right? Okay, so you've mentioned intermittent fasting, so obviously you had to make some lifestyle changes.
Mm-hmm.
How was that for you once you've, you know, I didn't want to, I don't want to use the word of rehabilitation because that's not, maybe that's not what that is, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like coming back to some sort of normality, like, you know, day to day things that you would like to continue and carry on doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wasn't able to go back to work. So, I've been on permanent disability, and um, so things were difficult financially for sure. Um, but I just kept trying to get better, whether mentally, physically, emotionally, and stuff like that. And I happened upon intermittent fasting through Dr. Pedals, the cardiologist. I was seeing him for a regular visit, and I'm waiting in the exam room, and he comes in and he throws this book at me, and he says, buy this, read this, do this, but only after you get approval from your other 6 doctors that I'm under the care of. So that took a little while. The book was called The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung, and it's all about the medical reasons intermittent fasting is unbelievable for your body and for weight loss. And um, the medical society knows about it, and they try and poo-poo it. Right,
Yeah.
poo-poos it. But to be honest, we ate this way for hundreds of thousands of years before we figured out how to be agrarian and how to process food the way we do
Mm,
now.
mm,
So it was pretty normal to go 20 or 30 or 40 hours without a meal. And that's the way our bodies seem to be happiest about it. So I went along with those protocols, and I thought it would be much harder than it was, and it wasn't actually that difficult. And then I happened upon a lady named Jen Stevens, and she had a huge Facebook group of like 350,000 people. And she wrote a book called Delay, Don't Deny. And it differed from Dr. Fung's book in that it actually told you the various ways you could fast, because one way might work for me, but not for you.
mm.
And so she made it very, very user friendly. And I actually became a moderator in her group. And so I really had to ramp up my knowledge game of intermittent fasting. Um, Jin's philosophy on intermittent fasting is that it's a health plan with a side benefit of weight loss. And
Mm.
he wrote an even better book after Delay, Don't Deny called Fast, Feast, Repeat. So if I'm introducing anyone to intermittent fasting, that's my Bible. That's what I tell them to read. And once they read it, I'm happy to help them with any questions or concerns they have.
I do love that title though. Fast, feast, repeat.
Mm-hmm. I
That's
wish I
actually
could
very
claim it was
memorable.
mine, but had nothing to do with it.
It's a very memorable name there as well. But it's obviously intermittent fasting is known out there, and a lot of people talk about it. And as you said, yeah, medical professionals do not like people to talk about it. But that you've got the book and the
Mm-hmm.
journey started for you there, which is amazing. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I wanted to say thank you very much for coming on to Tuesday Talks and sharing your amazing journey, sharing your vulnerabilities with us as well, and talking about your book and the other doctor's book as well.
Mm-hmm.
Recommend people to go and check it out. Your book definitely worth the read. From what we heard today, we want to know a little bit more. Definitely, I'll recommend everybody to read it. Um, how can they go about getting that book if they're
Uh,
interested?
well, it's available on Amazon.com and Amazon.ca. I'm not sure because Amazon's kind of fragmented. For as
Hmm.
all powerful as they are, sometimes the books don't get distributed to countries equally. So I'm for sure on those. I think it's going to be in Barnes and Noble in the States, probably Chapters Indigo in Canada, or they can message me on Instagram, repeatedly Dead Fred, and I can try and arrange a copy for them if they'd like.
That is amazing. I'm sure people can try all those avenues. Amazon.com usually, yeah, usually that works. I think they try to switch you, and they probably just charge you extra if you're shipping it across. But just get in touch with repeatedly Dead Fred, and then I'm sure you can also sort that out as well for them. Now it's a tradition on Tuesday Talks that what we usually get the guests to also, before we wrap these things up, to share some closing comments as to what would they like to leave the guests and the listeners with. So what would you like to leave everybody with as a wrap up, as we wrap this up?
Life is going to be hard sometimes, and you don't have to face it alone. And I had all these wonderful people from my various communities step up for me, people I didn't even know. And I couldn't have done this without my family and those people. So if you're feeling isolated, reach out, because there are people that want to help you. They'd love to help you. You just have to let them know that you're available to be helped. And I'm not saying that's easy to do. You can feel pretty vulnerable with things like that, but it'll make a huge difference both in your life and in their lives, because you're actually the fuel that feeds them, because they want to do good things for other people. One of the other things I learned from this journey is I think it's from Malcolm Gladwell, who's written a number of bestsellers. But as you become older, you become the composite personality of the 5 or 7 or 10 or however many people you spend the most time with. And when you become surrounded with people like I have that are just, off the charts good souls, you absorb it by osmosis. And I have become a much better person, I say very humbly, than I was, 15 years ago. Yes, some of it's my work, but a lot of it is just having those constant examples of how to be a better person around you. And that alone can help people recover their health and change the directions of their lives. Your mindset is everything.
I love that, and I love the last line you just mentioned there as well. Your mindset is everything, because I was going to ask, you had to have a very strong mindset to have and continue, because listening to what you've gone through, you know, as you hear, people usually give up or say, what's the point of doing anything that you're doing now? They'll look for the bottle or look for whatever escapism that they can get to not be in the situation that you are. But I love how you pivoted and used this to uplift yourself as well, and with the supports of your community of people already, family members, strangers, who were just there to help. And you acknowledge that and you accepted that. Okay, let them help you, which you're right, 100% is difficult to ask, and sometimes it's difficult to accept as well. When people are helping you, we are like, no, I'm okay. I'm fine. Don't do this. And those little things. People are just trying to help. What I always say as well, just accept it. It's coming your way. You just need to accept it. And say thank you and whatever you need to say. You just need to accept it. There's no point. If it wasn't meant for you, it won't come your way anyway. So if it's coming your way, it's for you. So you just accept it and be grateful that it's been acknowledged. So, and I love that it's all happened to you in terms of becoming even a better person, as you just said. Um, it's a shame that you had to go through an adversity to obviously see that light,
Hmm.
but you've seen it, you're there, and you're here to share that journey. So I love that, and thank you very much for taking the time out to share this with us. Just a quick message for people who are now tuning into this on Instagram Live and watching this now. This will be left on Instagram Live as an episode for until it's been released on platform or for podcast. So you are able to rewatch this if you've just tuned in. And if this episode has sparked sparked something in you, it's our duty now to share this with whomever comes in your mind, or you think that should be the person listening to this. Just tag that person into this episode, or just share it on your stories or with that person, because we need to share the spark or inspiration that comes within us and not just keep it with us, because that's all we need to start the spark in the other person and get them to take that step there, because we don't know who's just woken up or gone to bed thinking of a better day. And if this episode's created that spark for you, it might just create that for them as well. Is because we're working with that might, it might just happen, and that person just does a whole 360 turn and then takes that step. So once again, thank you very much, Fred, and repeatedly dead Fred as well. Thank you for coming on and taking us through this amazing journey of yours.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This has been a great experience. And I love the way you summed everything up at the end. That was fantastic.
No, thank you very much. So this episode will be left on both sides, on both platforms, because it will be done as a collaboration. So just keep an eye out on your message. There will be a message there saying it's a collaboration.
Okay. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.